Welcome to this KOIN 6 special weather presentation, May weather in the Pacific Northwest, streaming on KOIN Plus. Hi there, I'm Chief Meteorologist Josh Cozart. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to take a deeper dive into the weather seen across the Pacific Northwest during the month of May. We'll cover average rain accumulation, new monthly temperature trends, and what to expect in the weeks to come. Plus, the impacts a growing drought threat has as wildfire season nears. And later on, Portland National Weather Service and Oregon State climatologist Larry O'Neill sit down with me to talk about the seasonal transition from spring to summer and what threats it may include this month. But first, a closer look at Portland's typical weather pattern in the month of May. On average, temperatures will begin to warm here across the Portland-Vancouver metro area and much of the Pacific Northwest. Portland in particular expected to see our new average daytime high approach 70 degrees. Overnight lows also expected to warm close to 50 degrees for those early sunrise hours. And as far as our rain accumulation, well, we will start to taper that back as well, approaching about 2.5 inches as our skies slowly begin to dry out. Now for the first part of the month, 66 degrees. Keep in mind, May, a warming month for much of our area as we end up on the final day of May on the 31st. That's where our new average daytime high temperature will be pushing the mid-70s, all because our daylight hours continue to add up. For much of the Pacific Northwest, Portland, Vancouver, northern sections of Oregon, southwest Washington, expected to near 66 new minutes of daylight hours. And of course, that's going to be adjusting our sunset times as well for the month of May. For the start, that's where our sunrise hours are just before 6 o'clock. 8:18 is our new sunset time, but fast forward to the very end of May, well, that's where we are approaching almost 9 o'clock sunsets. And as we fast forward into the summer solstice, that's where 9 o'clock sunsets will be the new norm. All of this gain in daylight time, well, that's just helping to continue our warming trend here across the Pacific Northwest. May is also known for some of its wild weather swings, from extreme heat to late season frost. Portland can see it all. Gardeners beware, because the chance of frost is a very slim but possible chance. We've seen frosty temperatures in the Portland-Vancouver area as late as May 23rd of 1964. Now it's back in the middle to end of April that we typically see our average last frost, but that outlier does mean that gardeners should still pay very close attention. But with those wild temperature swings also comes some above average conditions. You can see it was just back in 2023, our average daytime high and overnight low combined, well, it almost hit 65 degrees, making it one of the hottest Mays we have ever experienced. So you can get the frost or you can get the extreme heat. That's all on the cards and on the table. As we clear out those skies over the next 5 days or so is the grand total that we see in the month of May. Partly cloudy conditions, a grand total of a week, and the clouds, well, they still stick around for much of the Pacific Northwest with just at about 20 days with cloudy skies. Now, that will help to give way to some wet weather. This is a trend over the recent years that we've seen. Our average, again, about 2.5 inches of moisture. It was back in 2022. We saw a surplus and just shy of that average just last year. And will likely be on the drier side over the next 4 weeks as the Climate Prediction Center is anticipating the precipitation to be slightly on the drier side for the southeastern sections of our state, including parts of the Portland-Vancouver area, as temperatures are expected to sit on the higher side. On top of that, that means the pollen counts are going to remain on the high side. This is a look at some of our average peaking at April. That's because of all of the blooms and blossoms. Now we start to transition with that moderate to high level in the month of May for the grasses to start to ramp back up again. So it's a double-edged sword. If it's the flowers that give you a tough time, now it's going to be the grasses or vice versa. And that's going to carry us in to the month of June as well. Coming up, as we turn the calendar to May, Lee Picard, lead meteorologist at Portland's National Weather Service, is keeping tabs on Oregon's thunderstorm potential. But first, let's take a look at some of the incredible images you've captured across the Pacific Northwest this spring. Share yours by scanning the QR code on your screen. Welcome back to this KOIN Plus Weather Special. Portland's National Weather Service is responsible for weather forecasting in and around the Portland region. As May unfolds, Pacific Northwesterners should prepare for a changing weather pattern. Lee, thank you so much for taking time to join us today. And May is quickly coming in. And what do we typically see across the Portland, Vancouver metro area in a typical May? What should we expect to see?
Sure. May is a true transition season for us. So really, April, May, June all together is when we're switching from our cool and wet winter pattern to our much warm and drier summer pattern. So a typical May is a lot warmer at the end than the beginning. Certainly drier than our peak winter months where we see upwards of 5 inches of rain. We typically see about 2.5 inches in Portland. So still on the wetter side compared to our really dry summer, but sort of rapidly shifting into that much drier and warmer pattern.
And with that, kind of the transitional change, is that something
Mhm.
that can typically increase our thunderstorm potential, the chance for seeing maybe even severe thunderstorms? Or is that really, do we have a season here in the Pacific Northwest, and does it fall in the month of May or the transitional months?
Yeah, that's really a question. Do we have a season? In an average year, Portland sees 7 days of thunderstorms over the whole calendar year. And that comes out to about one per month from March to September on average. So if we have a season, it's basically the warmer half of the year, but it's not a very strong, impactful season. The chances of severe weather are even lower than that. So, if there were a time of year where it would be most likely, I would say probably the summer, July and August, simply because that's when things are the warmest. The atmosphere is the most primed for thunderstorm activity. But again, it's kind of a weak peak. So, we certainly have a chance. But our season here is certainly nothing compared to portions of the country farther east.
And I think many of us would be grateful to say just that, given everything we've seen this spring season out towards our
Yes.
east. But as far as our area goes, we've
Mhm.
picked up just a little isolated rain shower or two for the very tail end of April. A lot of people say no April showers, they bring the May flowers. We've kind of been lacking in the rain department this past month. What is your guys' kind of vision moving forward over the next 4 weeks? Are we going to keep this drier, warmer trend? Could we
Mhm.
maybe sneak out a 90-degree temperature as well?
Sure, we can kind of see a little bit of everything in May. The only thing that might be off the table truly is our winter weather. But for looking ahead at the next 4 weeks or so, in terms of temperature, we might lean a little bit on the warm side, but the signal is very weak. So cool days are certainly not out of the question yet, especially through the first half of the month. Something like a overnight freeze is certainly still possible for anyone who's got some plants at home. In terms of the rainfall, though, that's probably our big question. Uh, we are expecting, more likely than not, a drier month of May. That's not to say that we won't get anything, but chances are best for below normal precipitation this May. Not a great sign after a pretty dry April so far. So hopefully we get something. We don't want an early fire season, that's for sure. Anything will help at this point, but chances are best for a drier than normal May.
Can you kind of explain to me a little bit about your guys' relationship with the Climate Prediction Center, with the U.S. Drought Monitor? Do you guys all kind of collaborate, or is it all kind of just build upon itself looking forward over the next few weeks?
We definitely collaborate with those national partners. So we provide, of course, our local observations. That goes into their overall assessment of the sort of regional trends when it comes to precipitation. One wet site or one dry site doesn't make for an aerial drought of any kind. So we provide that information up to them, and they do sort of, again, the kind of big picture assessments of what a state or a region of the country might be seeing. The Climate Prediction Center, soon to be part of the Weather Prediction Center in the coming months here, over in College Park, Maryland. They do, again, sort of that sort of seasonal scale forecasting. So they we talk to them sort of about broad expectations, but they're really the experts when it comes to that scale of forecasting. So we chat, sort of on the near end what we think about weeks 1 and 2, but when you get out to weeks 3 and 4 and a seasonal outlook, that's really leaning on the experts there at CBC.
And when you guys are kind of looking forward over the next 4 weeks, what is the National Weather Service really keeping a close eye on as this potential rain deficit kind of moves in, especially in relation to wildfires? What are you guys looking at most closely?
Yeah, that's probably my biggest concern is I'm going to be looking for rainmakers. Every system we can get to drop a good wetting rain, a quarter inch or more, is going to help because our fuels are already looking on the dry side for this time of year. Of course, as we get deeper into the summer, we typically get less and less rain. So we want to see rain while we still can. If our fuels are dry to start the summer season, that sets us up for what could be a busy fire season. A lot of other things go into that, weather patterns through the summer, and then of course actual ignition is very difficult, if not impossible, to forecast. So that's another story entirely. But having dry fuels definitely primes us for that, and that could be a concern moving forward. We're of course watching for heat. We're in this time of year when an early season heat wave might catch people off guard. So if that were in the cards, we're going to be working with our local partners to prepare communities for potential heat. And then I mentioned it briefly, but particularly for agricultural interests, we're looking for those cold snaps too, right? Could we see a late season freeze that affects some of our farmers out there in some of our more rural areas? So those are some of the bigger things that we're watching at this point.
And kind of leaning into, we typically think of wildfire season as
Mhm.
mostly the higher elevated spots. I know that snow is kind of out of the cards for the Portland, Vancouver area, much of the Willamette
Yeah.
Valley, but is that still something that might be on the horizon over the next 4 weeks for the higher terrain? Maybe see some higher snow elevation.
Sure. Yeah, our high terrain areas could certainly still see the snows. Pass level may be stretching it, but above that, where we really have our snow pack, our snow reserve, could certainly still see something. We need to see a storm though. So as long as the low elevations are dry, the high elevations are likely dry too. So any system now that brings rain down here at the valley and also gives us some snow up in high terrain would help water concerns moving forward.
Kind of moving forward over the next month, what is probably residents' biggest takeaway of what should they be paying close attention to in regards to what information you guys have to share?
Sure. The one of the biggest weather risks that people don't always pay attention to is going to be that early season heat. So that's probably the thing people can watch out for to keep themselves the safest at this point is to keep an eye on those hot days. I know, for example, this coming Thursday is looking like a pretty warm day where a lot of areas, especially in and around Portland, could be talking at least mid 80s for highs. That doesn't sound particularly dangerous on the surface, but when you're coming out of our cool winters, 85 can catch some people off guard. So be prepared for some of those warmer days. Start thinking about how you're going to stay cool. And going forward, those are going to become increasingly likely as we get into the summer. We'll start acclimating. Your body will acclimate as the background temperatures heat up. But some of these early season heat waves can definitely catch people off guard.
Yeah, especially for anybody who might be working outdoors
Right.
consistently, you got to think about the changing of the attire to fit that. But Lee, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, a dry end to April could carry over to a dry May. Oregon State climatologist Larry O'Neill explains how May weather could set the stage for this year's wildfire season. Welcome back to this KOIN Plus weather special. Portland saw a nearly 2-inch rain deficit in the month of April, and May could follow the same drier weather pattern. Oregon State climatologist Larry O'Neill joins us with a closer look at how Oregon's drought could impact the region in the months to come. Looking at some of the climate predictions for the month of May, kind of trending drier, maybe slightly warmer or right around average. How does that kind of play into looking towards the wildfire season?
Yeah, so we've had this trend over the last few springs, maybe over the last 5 to 10 years, where we have some sort of rain during the wet season. Sometimes it's much above normal, sometimes it's less. And what happens during the spring is that spring conditions are really shaping very strongly what happens during the summer. And so we think about, the big event that we had in June 2021 with our, heat dome or the heat wave we had. But we've also had a few other heat waves that happen earlier in the season than we usually have had. Last year was a good example. We had the first week of July was a big heat wave across Oregon, and that really set the stage for the historic wildfire season that we had last year. And just to go back to last year in a little bit more detail, we had actually really good wet season. We had good snowpack. A lot of the state was at normal or above normal in precipitation. But what happened during the spring and summer was we had the heat wave, and it just really sucked all the moisture out of the ground very quickly. And by early July, like July 4th last year, we had the conditions basically across the landscape, and that included like the soil and a lot of the vegetation and things. We were kind of experiencing dry conditions that were more indicative of late August, early September. And we're starting to see that signal pick up again this year, obviously. So we've had a dry April, not only in terms of precipitation, but also in what we call evaporation. So it's just basically the ability of the atmosphere to suck moisture. All that rainfall that great rainfall we got during the winter is just being sucked out at a very high rate. And so what that's leaving us is, we're starting to see very dry conditions that are not normal for this time of year. And one of the reasons why it's so significant in the spring is because we're losing the prospect of getting enough rainfall to replenish that moisture back into the landscape. And so now we're starting to become a little bit more confident that this will be another dry summer.
So would you maybe say that May is kind of that tipping point where we start leaning one direction or the other with what comes to fruition this upcoming month?
Yeah, that's right. I think May or June, I think are good times right now where we can start to be a little bit more confident in how the summer is going to shape up. And that includes the wildfire conditions, as you alluded to earlier, but also that includes drought conditions and how much yield we'll get from agricultural production and, some of the other things. But this is all happening in the backdrop of we actually have a good water supply in terms of our reservoir storage. So we're not expecting any sort of like water shortages for our municipal water supply. So you'll be able to turn on the faucet, everything will be fine. But this kind of drought is more of what I like to refer to as a landscape drought, where the soil and the vegetation become really dry really fast. And these sort of things tend to happen pretty quickly, over the course of just a couple of weeks. And we've learned, especially over the last several years, is that these conditions creep up on us really quickly and then become, very persistent throughout the summer.
Can you talk a little bit about how many of us are looking at maybe the drought map right now and we say, hey, Oregon is completely clear of any drought. This is good news. Is that almost a false sense of hope? Is it good news? Is it something that we should just take with a grain of salt?
Yeah, right now, actually, take it with a grain of salt. And the reason I say that is I chair a group that gives suggestions to the U.S. Drought Monitor, and a large part of Northwest Oregon we're going to put under what's called abnormally dry conditions, or D0 or D naught. And that's in response to the last several weeks has been much warmer than normal, and the soils have dried out very quickly. They were really moist, and we were starting, March, we were actually starting, hoping that we'd have actually a good summer, that this stuff would persist through there. But the last several weeks have shown us something different. And right now we're seeing a very strong dry signal in Northwest Oregon. One of the things we're seeing is that the stream flows in several basins right now are actually at record low levels for this time of year. We are a bit worried that the rest of the landscape, which will be much drier than normal, And this includes increased wildfire risk and increase in, the need for increased irrigation of, crops and whatever else.
And kind of speaking along the lines of vegetation, with us having such a successful March in the rain department, and now we're rapidly warming up, I've noticed that all of the plant life is really starting to thrive.
Yeah.
And if we start drying out into the summer months, that poses a bit of a threat of all that new overgrown fresh vegetation could potentially be kindling for something worse later on.
That's exactly right. That's a really good way to put it. And so if we have a lot of like this, what we call fine vegetation, it does act when it cures or when it dries out, as it usually does during summer, it's drying out much earlier than normal. And so our wildfire season basically starts much sooner than it used to do. So that's a bit worrying this year, especially considering that we're still grappling with the levels of staffing and support for wildfire, fighting wildfires and things like that. So if we had an earlier season this year, it might be more impactful. And right now, with it being in Northwest Oregon, so the biggest place we see right now is kind of in or that I see at least, is in Northwest Oregon, and that's where our population centers are. And we're already starting to see, these burn piles that are starting to lose control or whatever, start an acre or two fire. And so those aren't really impactful yet, but another month or two when the landscape is really dry, those things will start to become a lot bigger and more dangerous. So so it is a bit of a worrying sign. Because this is just April, we have had precedents of having a wet May or wet and cool May in June or something. And that could help kind of recover some of this. So we're not sure exactly how long term this is, but for right now, with the conditions that we're seeing right now, things are starting to look worrying for sure.
Just all keep our fingers crossed that hopefully things go around the corner the way that we would like to see them, even though I think a lot of people enjoy the early onset of spring. It's always kind of exciting, but we need to get back to some normalcy for us here too.
That's out. Yeah, absolutely. And another piece besides wildfire risk is that we grow a lot of food in Oregon, essentially. And so and people don't necessarily realize that, but a lot of, the crops we grow are used for our food. And if we have drought conditions or these, really erratic, rapid drying spells or what have you, is that really affects the amount of food that we can produce and the economic value of that food. And right now that's kind of important because we're anticipating not only, the increased costs of our groceries and things like that, but also the economic benefit it provides to the state. And so both of those, when we have these periods of rapid drought or whatever, it can really wreak havoc to our agricultural production and livestock production as well. And so that's also something to keep in mind as well when you're thinking about, what does this weather mean for us? And that's one big thing to keep in mind.
That does it for this KOIN Plus special weather presentation on all things May weather here in the Pacific Northwest. If you're just now tuning in and you want to watch it back, you can find the full story at KOIN.com. Until next time, I'm KOIN 6 Chief Meteorologist Josh Cozart. Have a great day.